Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the class imbalance issue and how to handle it using the GAN-based data augmentation techniques in the field of medical images. Before we go into actual research work, let us understand the background of this issue. What is the actual issue? What has been done so far to address this issue? And what we are going to propose in this research work. So in this research, we mainly talk about the ISIC dataset. For this research work, we have used the 2020 archive of the ISIC dataset, and on the screen you can see the sample images of this archive. These images are dermoscopic images of different skin lesions, and we can see in the screen that the variation in the images are huge. The images vary based on their shape, on the intensity of the lesions, size of the lesions, and also skin tone. And this variation makes it challenging for the classification task for the skin lesion detection. And to add into challenge, we also know that there is a huge class imbalance present in this archive. And you can see in the chart as well that the majority of the images that are more than 30,000 are actually marked as unknown, and following the unknown, we have the navis that is also 5,000 plus. In comparison with the melanoma, which is actually very critical to detect because we know the fact that the melanoma adds up the more number of death in comparison of a benign type of skin lesion images, right? So here we can see the huge class imbalance issue is present in the data set, and thus in this research, we are proposing various techniques to address the class imbalance by augmenting the synthetic images in the training data set. And based on the training data set, we are going to train the classification models. But before that, let us understand what all research work has been done so far in this area. And before that, now we understood that the basic aim of this research is to be able to come up with the generative model, be it again, be it autoencoder that is one stable, second diverse enough, and third is efficient. Now, why diverse? Because we know that the skin lesion images will not be consistent, as we have already seen in the previous slides, and also we know that in the future the diversity in the images will help to make this classification model robust enough to perform well enough in the upcoming or unseen data set, right? And efficient and stable goes as their name. We need this because the GANs are actually prone to have a stability issue, right? The mode collapse and the gradient explode are the very common issues in the GANs. So we need to prepare a generative model which is a stable in the nature and also an efficient, because we also know that as the resolution of image goes high, the efficiency of the generative model goes down, and this is a critical issue because for any proper classification model we need a higher quality images to be present in the training data set itself. So let us talk about what all the research has been done so far. So in the related work, we can see that there are GAN itself is not a new concept, right? From the 2014, from when Mr. Ivan has proposed this architecture of a generator and discriminator model running together to be able to come up with the combined architecture that is able to produce the images, that is able to mimic the training data set. Post this invention, post this announcement of the GAN, various researchers has been worked on it, and various variant of the GANs has been already in the community, right? So if we are not going much deep into the all the variants, we can classify, we can like segregate the type of the GANs. That is, first a normal vanilla GAN that we can see. The most famous example of the normal GAN is a DC GAN. Apart from that, a condition GAN is also there. For an example, AC GAN is a conditional GAN, that is a pure normal GAN, just with the input. There is also another, with the input of noise vector, there is another input that condition the GAN to produce a particular type of the output. And after that, there are progressive GAN. Now, progressive GAN specifically were introduced to generate, to be able to generate a higher resolution images. But as we can see, the resolution goes high, the computation cost goes high, and thus it doesn't stay much efficient as in general. And there is another style gain. So style gain is an interesting type of gain here, because we in general, the gains are meant to produce a mimic the training data set as similar as possible, right? But in the context of this research, or the similar kind of thing where we need the diversity in the training data set present, and if we augment the images which are similar to the training images or which are similar to each other, the diversity will not be present, right? So style gain is actually meant to provide the diversity in the data set by style mixing and like that. And because of this feature on this specification only, the style gain are actually pretty much performing well in context of the dermoscopic images. But style gain, of course, it has its own overhead, and as style gain introduce some overheads, it consumes more time, and the computational task in general goes high. So let us talk about the gaps. Okay, so the gap is which we already discussed, that the computationally GANs are bulky, and as the complex in the nature the network is, the time consumption for the training goes high, right? And there is another um, majorly seen gap is that they are often unstable, and as resolution of the images goes high, the issues like mode collapse, issues like gradient explode is often present in the GAN. Generally talking about the normal GANs, the progressive GANs are actually uh, introduced to handle this limitation specifically. And the GANs are manually evaluated normally, because see, when we see that we want a diversity in the output images, the metrics like inception score will not provide uh, much of the informative measure there, because we actually want the output images to stay diverse. So the lower IS score will not indicate the better output. So the and normally, in case in such contexts, the GANs are semi-supervised, where outputs are manually evaluated. Apart from that, from our investigation and from our literature review, we could see that the GANs are often performing really good in the radiographic images like CT scan, MRI, X-rays. But when it comes from the comes to RGB images, for an example, the ISIC dermoscopic images, that is color images, um, as the number of channel goes high, the grayscale image has one channel, while RGB image has three channels. So as the number of channels in the image input image goes high, the performance decreases in general. And of course, dermoscopic images are less exposed in the field of research with the GANs. So these are pretty much all the gaps which in this research work is going to attempt to address them, right? So let us now talk, now we know the what is the issue and why we need to address this issue. So now let us, we are actually ready to understand how we are going to address this issue. So let us talk about the methods which we are going to perform to come up with the proposed mechanism. Okay, so methods here, as we see that ultimately we want to come up with the generative model, right? So the basic generative model which is there in the field of computer vision since long is autoencoder. Okay, so autoencoder in the terms would not provide much diverse output. As we already know, it is mainly to reduce the dimensionality and to able to like decode back the original image from the um, lower dimension GFV. But here autoencoders can help us in terms of reducing the dimensionality itself. Now the problem of the diversity that will be addressed by the GANs, because GANs in a term can provide a diverse images if it is trained properly, if the architecture of the GAN is proper. And then we could attempt to integrate both encoder and the GAN together and come up with some architecture which would have the benefits of the both and which would eliminate the limitation of the both, right? So let us first talk about the autoencoder and understand how it works, and then we'll go further. So as we know that autoencoder is actually a single architecture, but inside we can segregate in the two parts, like the first which accept the inputs. In our case it would accept the images, and then it would decrease the dimensionality of the input and convert the GFV, convert it into the GFV. Now GFV, we can talk about GFV as a latent space vector if we are plain talking about the autoencoder only. But in the context of this research where this is going to be integrated with the GAN, GFV as in global feature vector is a correct term here. So the autoencoder which have the two segments in it, encoder and decoder. So encoder's role is to encode the input into lower dimension, and decoder's role here is to convert back that lower dimensional code or lower dimensional GFV back into the original or similar looking images or similar looking the output. Right. So this is a general architecture of the encoder. We will not go much deeper in the encoder because um, we are much focused in the integration system. As before we go into the integration system, let us first understand how the GAN works, right? So GAN again has two segments, but unlike the autoencoder, GAN has a two separate networks itself. So first network is called generator and the second network is called discriminator. As name goes, generator's role is to be able to generate or mimic the training data, and discriminator's role is to discriminate whether current input is a fake or generated one or a real one, right? So as we can see in the image, generator will have the random noise as an input. Now noise can be one dimensional vector or a matrix, anything like that, whichever it fits best in the overall picture. But the input would generally be a lower dimensional. Um, as from the input, generator will generate some output. Now output would be compared with the real data, like a training image in this context. So generated image and training image now goes into discriminator, and discriminator would learn whether the current image which discriminator is examine, whether it is real or fake. And based on the discriminator's ability to correctly identify whether the current input image of the discriminator is a real or fake, the both of the network, discriminator and the generator, will get trained accordingly. And as the training goes higher and higher, discriminator will become more robust to identify whether the current image is real or fake. And generator, as generator is being trained on the same laws as the discriminator is making, but in the inverse manner, the generator is also going um, learning the pattern in which it should generate the data. So basically generator actually learns the data distribution of the training images indirectly. So now we understand the autoencoder, now we understand the GANs. So let us understand how we can integrate both of this to actually get the benefits of the both, right? So here in the image, we can see the integrated system of AE and GAN, AE as an autoencoder. So now we can see there is a fundamental difference here. Now generator is generating a GFV. GFV is a similar GFV that autoencoders encoder part would generate based on the real image, right? And we know GFV are in fact in a lower dimension. Generator will also need to output in a lower dimension. Now that makes generator less complex in a term. And the discriminator also will now discriminate between real GFE and generated GFE. Now discriminator doesn't have to deal with the actual image and the fake image. It will only deal with the lower dimensional intermediate data, or we can say that the global feature vector, and it will discriminate whether current global feature vector is coming from the real data or generated data. And based on the same mechanism, it will identify whether it is a correct data or generated data. It will learn the loss, it will fine tune itself, it will fine tune generator, and as training goes high, generator will now learn the data distribution of the GFEs. It will it will not learn the data distribution of the real images, but the GFEs. And now we know that GFE are actually in a lower dimension. Both generator and discriminator are now working on the lower dimension. So basically we can say that overall architecture is becoming less complex. We will see in the further slides how actually it makes a difference at the end. But at this moment, we can understand that we are able to reduce the dimensionality, and thus we are able to reduce the complexity of the overall architecture. And because of this achievement, we can also eliminate that limitation where we already know that the GANs are actually prone to instability, right? We have already reduced the dimensionality, and now we know that it doesn't go as high dimension as it would be in case of the real images, and thus we are eliminating the mode collapse issue and the gradient explode issue here. So let us go further and understand how this architecture would be um, evaluated, right? So we have proposed this architecture, and now let us understand the results of the architecture and see the figures, actual figures that coming out of the architecture. So the results will be evaluated in the three aspects. First, of course, image visualization. Yes. Second is the computational cost. We already are claiming that the computational cost of this architecture should go low, as we are making the overall complexity go down. And we are also, the main objective of this whole research was to able to come up with a generative model that can augment the training data, which is highly imbalanced. And thus, if we are able to augment the data properly, we should be able to improve the classification result as well, right? So let us understand the class image visualization first. So here in the screen, we can see that the first and topmost image is actually a real one, right? And in the second row, the images are 256 by 256, and in third row, images are 128 by 128. So for better visualization, we will focus on 256 by 256 as it is better in a quality. We can see that the first image from the left is generated from the AE. And now just compare the AE image with the original image, and you will see that autoencoder has precisely mimicked the original image, right? And that makes the autoencoder's job better, but it will not fit in this context, as we already know that we want diversity in the output images, right? And for the same, we have tried the same to generate the GAN, standalone GAN, from the input image, and we can see that the output of the GAN is much diverse, a different yet valid image from the input image, right? We can see that from input and the output of the GAN is totally different. Still, this image is valid skin lesion for the melanoma, but as it goes much diverse, but it also requires higher computational cost. But in the third one, from the first from the right and third from the left, that is the image which we have generated in with the integrated system of autoencoder and the GAN. We can see that the fair enough diversity is present in the third image. That is like comparable, that is visualized from the input and output. If you can see, here, if I can move my mouse, you'll see that the intensity of the lesson is in the left part of the image is diverse, is different from the input image, and thus we can see that the diversity is achieved with the integrated system. But main benefit of the integrated system you will see here, when we are actually comparing the inception score. Now we know that the two identical images inception score will be 1 because they both are same, and as the image goes differ, the inception score would wider, right? So for the same for the getting the upper bound, we have the last row where we have compared the inception score of the two totally different images, and we could see that that is 2.60. Again, it's the skin lesion image only, so it will not go as high as a 10 or 20, but we can say that the comparable 2.60 is much higher than the 1. Now understand, the AE generated images have the inception score in comparison with the original is 1.45. That is much closer to 1 in comparison with the 2.60. And the GAN generated image is a 2.16, that is closer to the different images rather than the similar images. But when we see that AE plus GAN generated images, that has the inception score of 1.89, that is well balanced placed, right? From the identical image to different image, 1.89 stays in between. So we can say that image stays valid for the class for which we are going to augment the data. Also, it consumes that diversity itself, right? So we could see that inception score is pretty much good indicator in terms of if we want to see the diversity in the image. Let us also understand how the computational cost is going to differ, right? So we know that autoencoder itself does have 855 millions of the trainable parameters. That is a huge number. In comparison with the GAN, standalone GAN, the trainable parameter with the similar, identical, we can say that similar architecture, the comparable parameter, trainable parameter is 607 million parameters. But as we know that we could achieve a significant amount of reduction in the complexity, in the dimensionality of the input and output of the generator and input of the discriminator. The GAN with AE, the integrated system, has only 15 million parameters. That is a huge reduction in the number of parameters, and that should actually reflect in the time consumption as well. So let us understand the time consumption as well. So the training time required for these three architecture, as you can see in the table at the right, autoencoder requires 27 minutes. Why? Because autoencoders are faster in learning. Autoencoders require really less number of epochs to learn the data distribution, which can be seen in the left hand side chart as well. That here we can see the autoencoders number of epochs, that is in orange, that is significantly less in comparison with the other two. So overall autoencoder would require 27 minutes for the mini batch. All these experiments are done in the subset of the actual train data. So autoencoder would require roughly around 27 minutes to get fully trained. In comparison with autoencoder, the GAN, standalone GAN, will require 156 minutes. So that is a significant high number. Why? Because one thing, GAN will require a higher number of epochs to get trained, and also GAN is having a higher number of trainable parameters as well, right? But as we could reduce the trainable parameter for the integrated system of GAN and AE, we could see that with the similar number of epochs in the integrated system, the training time requirement comes a significant down. Why? Because per epoch training time is significantly less in the integrated system. So overall time comes down as good as 3.33 minutes. So it is a huge reduction in the time consumption. And now let us also talk about the classification figures as well. So let us understand, if we have the untreated data, that is, as we have already seen in the initial slide, that is hugely imbalanced. because unknown and melanoma, unknown and the other navis, that skin lesion are dominating the overall data set, and thus the other classes are represented with very less number of images. So that if we are training our classification model with that data set as it is, we can see that we would achieve the accuracy as like significantly high, because even if all the images are being classified as unknown, then also majority of the images are correctly classified, and thus the accuracy will remain the high. So in such imbalanced data set, the metric accuracy is really misleading. In that case, the sensitivity is making more sense, because sensitivity will talk about the positive case. Here in our context, we have set the positive case as a melanoma, and how many positive cases are correctly identified in comparison with all the positive cases. So here we can say that only 8% of the melanoma were correctly identified, while remaining 92% of the melanoma cases were identified as unknown. So unknown, or the second one. So that makes the untreated data set classification on untreated data set really poorly performing. And as we try to improve the data set, first thing which we have done is a downsampling. That is a manual activity. Like 330,000 images are there in the unknown class, but let's cut down to random 1,000 images, and the 1,000 for the second dominant class. And if we are doing the downsampling manually or programmatically, um, we could achieve a significant number of sensitivity. Like from 8%, now we are having the 33% of the sensitivity. That makes sense, right? Because now we are saying that the overall training data set is comparatively less dominant on the first two classes, and the other classes are now representing fairly better. But again, we can see that the classes as melanoma, which would have images around 300 in comparison with the 1,000 images each on the first two dominant class, it is imbalance, right? So there is a scope of upsampling as well. Now we want to upsample in a way that we could achieve a proper accuracy, as well as we could achieve a higher number of sensitivity. Now to upsample, first we have tried a traditional image transformation. We rotated image at a certain degrees. We flip the images to bring some kind of diverseness, and upsample the um, the training image for the less dominant class, and so and perform the classification, and we could say that the sensitivity goes high as 0.48. Now this is 50%. So almost half of the melanoma classes are correctly identified. In comparison with the 8%, 50% is really good number. Not a 50, but 48% is a really good number. But now we are testing with our proposed mechanism of integrated system of GAN and AE. We know that it does produce the diverse enough output, and yes, so using that we could achieve, that is in the bold in the table, we could achieve a really good number of accuracy, as well as now the sensitivity is 57%. So if you compare with the 0.33% to 0.57, this is a better number, right? And we also try to like combine both traditionally transferred and the GAN with a integrated system. But we could say that integrated system of GAN in AE itself is performing good enough that we do not need traditionally transformed image in the augmented data set, right? So let us understand, let us go further and see um, how we can make the overall architecture as a fully supervised. We understand in the initial slide that the GANs are often semi-supervised. Why? Because at the end of the training, we need to manually evaluate whether the output images are actually diverse enough that will give us a good quality um, classification, right? But we can also achieve the similar thing with additional benefit with the proposed mechanism of the loop breaker. So loop breaker, in this research, we have introduced the loop breaker as an explicit feature That is not a generative model in general, but it is a complement to the generative model. So what loop breaker is doing, loop breaker is actually um, like taking the note of the a classification metric, and it compares as the GAN training progresses. It compares the current epoch, if whatever the GAN has been producing the images, if that is fed into the classification model, how well it will perform. And if we can see that the if any instability is present in the GAN itself and it is producing the lower or degrading the images quality, it will give us the early indicator. Like, so it is kind of early feedback loop. And if any such terminal condition is matched, the loop will be broken, and from the configured number of uh, epochs, it will traverse back and find the base possible epoch, and it will generate the images out of the same. Now, how it makes the overall architecture fully supervised, as because from here we can see that if our GAN is configured to run the 4400 epochs, um, we do not need to go and check for every epoch or every alternate epoch to see if the output is good enough for the classification. It is actually doing the same thing itself, programmatic, and it is storing the result. So let us understand the loop breaker in action. So here, if you can see in a chart, we can see that the GAN was configured to run some 400 times, as you can see in the x-axis, and on the y-axis it is a sensitivity, right? So we can see that the in earlier stages, like from first 100 or first 125, we could see that it is a legitimate area time span where GAN would actually be learning. So we are not actually looking in that portion, but afterwards we have started taking note of the um, sensitivity score per epoch or per alternative epoch or per any jump. This is a hyperparameter, right? So and as you can see at around some 171, we could see that there is a drop. Here we can say there is a drop in the sensitivity. We can take it like the GAN has reached a saturation, or GAN has encounter instability and now degrading the image, but it provided the signal that from this point onwards it doesn't make any sense to keep the GAN training. And from last 40 epochs, the 40 was hyperparameter also, we could see that we could achieve the best performing GAN, best performing GAN in terms of the classification. So that makes it supervised, fully unsupervised, right? So best performing GAN that on the classification we could achieve, and that makes life easier, right? So this is also a proposed mechanism, an additional proposed mechanism in this research. And now that we have understood what was the problem, what all has been done so far, what we are proposing here, and what is the result of this proposing, so now we are in a position to conclude this research, right? So let me conclude this research. So in conclusion, we can see the two major aspects that we should cover here. One, the sensitivity classification performance. The sensitivity score is improved by 72% from 0.33 with the manual downsampled to 0.57. That is a 72% of improvement in the sensitivity that we can achieve from the proposed mechanism. And also a time consumption that goes down to 78.8%, right? In general, 33 minutes would be required in training autoencoder and use that autoencoder in the integrated system. Overall 33 minutes would be required in comparison with the standalone GAN, which require 156 minutes. So these two are the major conclusive steps, points here. And before I close this presentation, let me open this research to the future studies. This research can be extended in the three major areas. One is image segmentation with image-to-image translation. So at the initial slide, we could see that the skin tones are different person to person, right? So that makes the additional, adds the additional challenge in the classification. But if we could achieve the image segmentation that could mask that particular skin lesson, and it would put that skin lesson to a uniform skin tone with the help of image to image translation of mechanism of the GAN. We could eliminate the variety of the backgrounds, and all the different type of the skin lessons would be compared on the uniform background. So that is one thing where we should be investigating and we should be researching further. The second is a conditional GAN. We know from the earlier class distribution chart that this data set has majorly 5 to 7 classes, right? Two classes we can eliminate, that they only had one images, so we can eliminate, but majorly 5 classes. Out of 5, 2 are highly dominant. On third, melanoma, we had done whole research, but we also know that there are 2 comparatively less significant in context of the severity of the skin cancer, but we could achieve the conditional GAN, the GAN which was conditioned to be able to produce a different type of output, right? So that also is a good enough for research area for this kind of study, this integrated system mechanism to further condition to generate a particular type of class instead of one rigid class of type of class, right? And the second one, this is a most interesting, and we also had done some research in the in our current research for the utilizing the reinforcement learning. Now reinforcement learning can be utilized to further enhance the clarity of the image. We know that the reinforcement learning can be trained such a way that it would learn the pattern. It will learn the pattern to understand which type of input for the GAN would help the GAN to produce the better output for overall, right? So the reinforcement learning can be utilized here um, as an extended study. And with these 3 future recommendation, here I am closing this research. Thank you very much for watching this till the end. Have a nice day further.